Wait for people from with development partners them with the between the program this morning. But let's start with the British High Commissioner. Good morning again, and Guy Warrington, and welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Yes, we just concluded the first rounds of the elections, and generally, what's your assessment on the conduct of the elections?
Well, I think the people of Sierra Leone can be very proud of how the first round of the elections went. They were clearly peaceful, which has met our expectations. They were transparent, and I think we would support the assessment of all the major observer missions that what we had was a robust and credible process in the first round. Which is not to say that the first round was perfect, and I think the EMBs, the NEC, the police, the PPRC are making improvements to the extent that they can for the second round. So we're very confident that the second round will. The first round was good, and we expect the second round to be better.
Right. So, Kathleen, from the Irish embassy, so far, are there any specific issues that you observe?
We had some people in the field on election day, and we agree with that assessment that it was the polling day was peaceful, credible, transparent, and inclusive. We saw a lot of improvements in those areas, and we are continuing to engage with NEC and the election management bodies on some adjustments that can be made to procedures on the day for the second round.
So what are the specifics?
So we observed some issues around counting and closing procedures, results management procedures. So NEC has been very transparent on some adjustments and improvements that they are working on.
So what's NEC need to adjust on?
So they're already working on some of the counting procedures, the results forms, and the transportation of materials. They were some of the issues that we were observing that have come up that NEC are aware of.
Right. Stay with us, Kathleen. Let me come over to Tom. EU, your presence was highly felt during the process. You have so many observers in the country. What are the specific issues that you observed during the elections?
Well, thank you very much. Let me perhaps first clarify that the EU observation mission is acting independently from the EU delegation. They have issued a preliminary report, which everybody should have access to, which details up to polling day what they have observed in the field. And I recommend that everybody has a look at this well-documented report. But as my colleagues have already indicated, what we all observed was that these elections were really broadly well managed. And what is very critical is, I think, that everybody was very happy to see that we had peaceful elections. People turned out in very high numbers, which indicated also the confidence that the people had in the process, and this was also evidenced by the way that we saw the way that the process was actually conducted. I mean, there were a number of issues, of course, some shortcomings which were noted, which are normal, I would say, in any kind of election. And there were some more, not on the management of the elections, but perhaps a few things that we could note. For example, the fact that there was also a very successful citizen observation in this process. So this is not only about the presence of international observers, but civil society had played a very constructive role in this process as well. As was noted, the elections were perhaps a setback in terms of women's representation, which is not something that can be addressed in the short term, but that we need to continue to work on also in the longer term. But overall, these elections were indeed well managed, and as the Irish ambassador already referenced, there were a number of specific shortcomings, which we have also noted and which we have also picked up from the different political parties and also from NEC itself, because NEC has been very proactive in engaging also with all the stakeholders to learn from this first round and to address some of the shortcomings.
Alright, in case you just tuning, the time for the studio clock now 8:45, and now the studio will get development partner them as they look at the outcome of the March 7 election and say they share their own observation then. Let me come to you, Maria, you are US Ambassador. You've been part of the process so far, and what are your observations from the March 7th elections?
Well, certainly I agree with what my colleagues have said, that it was by and large a well-run, well-organized election day, that there are lessons to be learned that NEC and the other election management bodies are taking on board. But if I'd like to build on something that my EU colleague said, which is what we observed, we had about 35 mission observation teams throughout the country. What we really observed were hundreds of Sierra Leoneans standing in line in the hot sun sometimes, waiting patiently to vote. They clearly took very seriously their obligations and their rights as citizens. And I think that was very heartening to see that, the places that I visited, nursing mothers and mothers with young children were allowed to go first. Elderly people were put to the front of the line. It was very impressive and heartening and really heart-touching to see Sierra Leoneans taking this on and taking it so seriously.
Maria, from the outcome of the March 7th elections, what are the lessons learned as Sierra Leoneans, the good lessons, and how can we implement them as we're getting ready for the re-run of the March 27th elections?
Well, I think the biggest lesson learned would be to make sure that everything is very transparent in terms of what will happen after the ballots are cast, and so that everyone understands, party agents, the staff, and the general public, what will that look like? What will the counting process look like? I know that NEC had made efforts before the March 7th and is continuing to make efforts on that to ensure that it is simple and easy to understand for all citizens, and that they can really feel that their voices have been heard and that their votes count. And that's, I think, the bottom line in a democracy.
Okay, Guy, let me ask you the same question. So what are the good lessons from the outcome of the March 7th election, and how can we implement them on the runoff?
So I think I'd reiterate what I said before the first round, which is very important that the political leadership of this country says to the members of the political parties the need for peace and the need to avoid hate speech, the need to ensure that anyone in this country, wherever they're from, feels free to vote for whichever party they want to vote for without intimidation. And those are the sorts of messages that I hope we will hear over the next few days. I think it's also important that the political parties follow the process and respect the results. We do hear the messages from the political parties that they have some issues with the first set of results. But the way to resolve that is to go to the NEC, to go to the police, to go to the PPRC, use the existing mechanisms to resolve those difficulties. Use the courts if necessary, but respect the process.
But Kathleen, so far we have seen political parties and their leadership, discrediting the whole of the process, calling for recounts after recounts, and some even call for a total recount of the whole election. Whilst local international observers are saying the elections were relatively free and fair.
Yes, that's right. My hope for the second round is that that both the political parties and the voters would proceed in the peaceful, calm, respectful way that they have been, that they respect the process underway, that they're familiar with NEC procedures and cooperate fully with NEC and the PPRC in terms of conducting the second round. I think that there are very good lessons that we can see, and we hope that they will be repeated. In terms of a recount, as I say, we believe that the first round was credible. We note that there were issues, and I think NEC is addressing those, and that's the most important thing at the moment.
Those issues are not enough to enhance the credibility of the whole process?
No, I don't believe they are.
Tom, reports from international and national observers, they both describe the whole electioneering process as a credible and fair one, but political parties has a lot of issues, calling on the EMB to do recounts on various constituencies all over the country. Do you think that NEC handled the whole process fairly?
Well, our assessment and the assessment of all the observer groups has been that indeed NEC has acted in a very professional manner. I have noted that NEC is always open to dialogue with those who see issues, and this is the channels that should be used indeed. If political parties, they indeed have the opportunity to raise them with the NEC and with the other electoral management bodies, and I believe they have been doing so too. From what I gather, NEC has indeed been listening to these concerns, and they have addressed a number of the shortcomings. For me, it is normal that this needs to be done with a sense of of moderation and looking at what is actually feasible, also within the time frame available and within the context that is available. But from our discussions that we have had and from our observations, we feel that NEC has indeed acted professionally and that they have done a very honest effort to address shortcomings which have been highlighted and concerns which have been raised.
But yet the political parties are calling on NEC to do a recount.
Well, I note, for example, that NEC has done a number of recounts. These recounts have not revealed a significant discrepancy with the original counts which have taken place. I think NEC is looking at all these questions with proportionality, and if there is a sound foundation to do this, then I think NEC has responded positively to that.
Maria, in the area of political parties understanding the process and procedures involved in the whole election process, Catherine mentioned it. From your observation and the issues going back and forth from NEC and political parties, do you think political parties and their leaders really understood the whole process and procedures involved in the elections?
Well, I can tell you, at least since my arrival here in September of last year, that I know that NEC has been doing quite a bit of outreach along with the PPRC for months, and I know that they have been asking the political parties to engage with them at a robust level. And I can tell you, whenever issues have come to our attention, to my attention, that our response to the political parties has been the same, which is, take your issues, take your concerns in a very specific way to NEC and to engage with them in a robust manner. And I see that it has worked to greater and lesser efficiency, that there are times when perhaps a more direct engagement might have been more useful, but I think that, definitely we're seeing, at the very highest levels of the political parties, people, really engaging with NEC. And I think that's a good thing. I can't speak for the parties as to what their concerns are. I can't alleviate them, but I can say as an outside observer watching the two groups engage that is something that we would encourage.
All right, well, stay with us. We get between at the studio the British High Commissioner, Guy Warrington, and also U.S. Ambassador Maria Bewa, U.S. EU Ambassador Tom Burns, and also Irish Ambassador Catherine Campbell. I'm going to continue for the retreat in the program. Come over to the studio, and I'll start with Guy Warrington, who are the British High Commissioner in Salone. Now, Guy, in as much as you guys are claiming that the election is relatively free and fair or credible, political parties still have concerns. They still have their issues. They are still raising them. Have you guys ever engaged the political parties and their leadership to look at their issues and evidence they have claiming that the elections was rigged?
Yes, I mean, we've had meetings with several of the political leaders, including the two political leaders who are still in the race, and they've expressed their concerns to us. We've encouraged them to go to the bodies responsible, which is the NEC, and we'll support the NEC in that. But we're very aware of what their concerns are.
So do you think they have legitimate concerns, or are their concerns significant enough to, hamper the credibility of the process?
So there's been a lot of concerns expressed by a lot of people, and those range from the very reasonable to the quite fanciful. So I think it is for the NEC to sort out which fall into which category.
But Guy, these concerns coming from the political parties, most people have been seeing this concern that the political parties just want to delay the whole electoral process.
Well, it's not for me to talk on what people's motivations are, but I think if someone expresses a concern about the process, then that needs to be considered seriously by those concerned. But I go back to our initial comment, that is that our analysis is that the ballot was credible, that the ballot was transparent, that the ballot was peaceful. And so that is our assessment.
What about the counting and tallying?
So these counting and tallying issues are exactly the sort of thing that needs to be taken. We can't comment on what happened in a particular tally, in a particular booth, in a particular place. These are the things that need to be taken to the NEC for the NEC to look into, and the NEC is looking into them. But I don't think that means that every demand that every political party makes or indeed every legal case that gets put before, that is necessarily correct. I mean, it is for the responsible bodies to decide whether. If you let me finish, please.
Okay.
It's for the responsible bodies to decide whether these cases have merit, and it is the constitutional role of the NEC to decide that.
These issues also have the tendency of discrediting the process. Catherine, the issues raised by the political parties, especially in the area of counting and tallying.
So, as the High Commissioner has said, we're encouraging the political parties to continue their dialogue with the National Electoral Commission. They have been already in a very strong dialogue. They've been meeting very, very frequently, and they're continuing to do so. So we encourage that dialogue, working through the questions and the issues that they have and sharing information, and to focus on what they can do in the next 5 to 6 days to ensure that everyone is ready and prepared for the second round, and to separate out issues that can be looked at afterwards.
Kathleen, the system used by NEC to input their data, it has been a very serious concern coming from the political party. They seem not to trust that system again.
Again, I don't think I can comment on the particular ICT system that NEC is using, but they have given us an assurance that it is very secure and it is very professional, and we stand by that.
And some political parties are calling on NEC to change the system ahead of the runoff election. Do you think that NEC really need to do that now at this point? We have a few more days to the March 27 rerun of the elections.
I think on a general point of principle that it's probably late in the day to look at very significant changes to the process, but as I say, to continue a dialogue, very frequent dialogue, and an engagement on the details of the questions that they have, so that they can be reassured before polling day.
Right. Tom, recently we had elections in neighboring Liberia and other West African countries in the last couple of years. Been having their elections. Do you think there are lessons that we should borrow from those elections around Sierra Leone in West Africa?
Yes, certainly. I think it's always very useful to look at what's happening elsewhere and to learn lessons there. And a few general points that I would like to note. I think that what we saw, for example, in Liberia was that the peacefulness of the overall process and the necessity to maintain the peacefulness around the whole process is absolutely key. A second point, I think, is that for all elections, they need to be well prepared. We need to work with institutions which maintain their independence and which are seen as independent and which can act as such as well. And what is very key also is that there's very clear communication around the electoral processes. I think some of the issues that we see today is perhaps because of some misunderstanding on some of the processes.
On the part of NEC or
well,
the political parties?
I think there is an issue which is at all levels. I think NEC has done an extraordinary effort to step up communication to clarify processes, but it's also true that there have been a number of changes which have been inserted until the last moment, which is difficult to communicate this clearly to be it party agents or to everybody involved in the process. These are some of the lessons learned, for example, which can feed into the runoff, that there is really very clear communication on some of these processes, particularly around closing and counting, for example, which could avoid some of the issues that we have seen. And the last point which I would like to note is that it is paramount that if there are issues which are arising, that everybody sticks to due process. It's clearly stipulated what kinds of procedures and processes are to be followed, which are the authorities responsible to address these, and in the end this has to be accepted. And I think these are some of the key lessons that we have learned.
Maria, we know maintaining the peace, just as Tom said, is very critical in this whole process, but leading ahead of the runoff, there is numerous reports of politically motivated violence, hate speech, regional tension, and those kind of things. What advice do you have for Sierra Leoneans in this direction?
Yes, thank you for answering, for raising this issue. That's something that I had wanted to talk about. So thank you for raising that. I think we have all seen in the last several days a rise in some of this hate speech. seeing the country being broken along ethnic and tribal and regional lines in a way that's very disturbing. And I'd like to appeal to the political parties, and we have appealed to the political parties not to indulge in that, not to engage in that, not to use that sort of language to further their own agenda, but also to the people of Sierra Leone, and be careful when using social media. Don't indulge in Kongosa and Care Grow Gwencom and all that putya where my cousin's brother sister heard that this it's not helpful and it's not productive, and it could lead to a very dangerous situation in this country. I know this country has been through some very difficult times in the past, and I know we would all hate to see that return. So please, I'm appealing to all Sierra Leoneans, be careful in the language you use, be careful in how you are speaking to each other, and that ultimately there will be an election, there will be a winner, there will be a loser, but in the end Sierra Leone has to survive, and Sierra Leoneans need to live in peace and tranquility with each other.
Guy, at this particular moment, everyone described these moments to be very crucial, and the elections management body has a critical role to play for us to have a successful final outcome of the runoff election. What do you have to say to the security personnel, like the police and also the military? They have a great role to play in the elections.
So I think it's worth saying before you asked me to give my messages to them that our analysis is that in the first round that the police and the security forces performed well and performed proportionately and responsibly, and my message to them would be to do that again. I think the most important thing I would say if I was addressing policemen or anyone in the military on a one-on-one basis is the importance for them to, in everything they say and do, to be seen to be neutral, and to enact the law without bias between political parties. I know that the senior leadership of both the SLP and the RSLAF have been putting that message to the troops and the policemen, but it can't be said enough. Political neutrality of the security institutions is absolutely vital.
I come over to Guy Warrington. Guy, now we just played two clips. One with the lawyer that is asking for an injunction on the conduct of the runoff, and the chairperson of NEC also on fire the content. What do you think, first of all, of this possible injunction on the runoff?
Well, as I'm sure you're aware, we can't possibly comment on the judicial process, because if we were to say anything positive or negative, it would be considered to be an interference with the judicial process.
But in terms of implication?
Well, it'll be for the courts to decide if there's an implication and look at the merits of the case. It is always better that people go to the courts than take to the streets. That is part of the dispute resolution mechanisms of this country. There are other alternative dispute resolution mechanisms. The PPRC has a group of eminent persons. I can see perhaps in the future, and we saw this in the first round, that the eminent persons who head up the observer groups can also play a role in mediation. So these are all parts of the legitimate resolution mechanisms that help take the heat out of the situation.
You are not available for any form of mediation?
I think actually it's better that there is African mediation in African elections. So I think the first port of call should be the local mediators, the eminent persons. If that doesn't work, then these eminent persons who come in with the observer missions.
That you are playing safe. So what's your role in this process?
Our role?
Yeah.
Our role is that we, as a diplomatic community, we're here to monitor and observe, as are others, but we are not here as the mediators of these disputes.
Let me bring in Kathleen. Kathleen, the president is also the chairman and leader of his political party. So far, what do you think of his role in the whole of the electoral process as the president, the head of state?
The president, I can't comment on his individual statements on the election, but we know that he's got a very deep commitment to the future of Sierra Leone. He always speaks in terms of tolerance, respect for democratic principles. So I think in that sense his role has been very positive.
civil society organization and other citizens have been calling on the president for him to come out and make a public statement condemning the violence and other regional issues that have been coming. Do you think it's timely for him now to come out and make a statement on that?
I think that's really for the president to make that choice and to make that response to a question from civil society. Civil society has been very vibrant, positive, robust presence in that election, so we always welcome statements that they have, opinions that they have, and they are very they're very strong and they're well prepared.
So the leadership and government still have a critical role to play for ensuring a peaceful transition. What do you have to say to the government?
Well, there were very clearly defined constitutional roles in this electoral process. There's a clear role for NEC. As the NEC chairman said, he is in charge of this process. The independence of the NEC has to be preserved, and I think that government is indeed also supportive of that role. Mind you, these elections are still costing money. There is money from the treasury which is still going to the NEC. This is one way. For example, the government is supporting this process. We have security bodies which are playing their role, which they also do with impartiality and neutrality. This is delicate time, so that we know that we are in these elections, and this need for neutrality and impartiality in the process is indeed important, and I am sure that all the organs are fully aware of that need.
President Nkrumah is still the president of the Republic of Sierra Leone. So far, how can you describe his role in the whole elections process?
Well, I think that President Nkrumah, in the run-up to the elections, has played a very constructive role, making sure that these elections are actually happening, also making sure that the appropriate resources have been allocated to the process. And then he has handed over to the institutional bodies which are responsible for actually managing the process.
Maria Beroa, we know you have the early warning system at the US Embassy. So far, what's your data speaking to in terms of violence, peace, and the conduct of Sierra Leoneans in general towards the runoff?
Yes, well, just to speak a little bit about the early warning system, that's a project that we've been supporting, that Sierra Leoneans are taking the lead on, but we've been supporting through our USAID projects, and we're very proud of that. But I can tell you that they have been raising concerns about, the increasing potential for violence, the increasing amount of hate speech, and the divisions that some people are exploiting along the tribal and ethnic and regional lines in this country. And I think they've been raising those issues in a very, very appropriately, because that is something that we see happening that we don't want to happen. I will say that all of the members, all my colleagues and myself, we issued a statement last Friday in which we talked about our concerns about this increased violence, increased hate speech, and called on everyone in Sierra Leone, the parties, the officials, to ensure that this sort of thing didn't go on, and to really show leadership and stop it whenever they could.
Right, according to the Commonwealth Observation Nations, their report, according to them, the police presence was intimidating, and there were issues of the way they handled the whole elections process. What is your assessment about the conduct of the police?
Well, as I said before, there were, I think, mostly observer missions. Observed that the police broadly conducted themselves in a very professional manner. The UK as have our US colleagues, we've spent a lot of time and money in training the police to respond professionally to any incidents where there is disorder, and what we saw during the first round was exactly that.
Kathleen, what is your own assessment on the role of the police during the election process?
Yes, I think I can certainly agree with that assessment, that their conduct during the election process was professional, and I observed officers being helpful and professional outside polling stations when I was out on polling day. I think certainly as the pressure on them mounts, as tension mounts, we would encourage them to maintain that and to maintain their independence and integrity. From what I personally observed, and I believe the observer statements afterwards did refer to that as well, and we would encourage them to maintain that position.
Tom, I would like to ask you the same question, the role of the police during the elections process. What is your own assessment?
I think we all share the same observations that the police in general have acted professionally in line with their duties. They have a role to play. They are there to make sure that peace is maintained also. They are there to act in the event of violence. They have to do so with moderation and in a strictly neutral way. And this is what we expect from them. And I think that by and large this has also been the case. And there has to be proportionality in relation to the issues which are coming up. There are perhaps some lessons learned also from the first round, and that will be taken on board. What I also note is that it is true, there is a distrust from opposition parties vis-à-vis the police. So what for me this means is that this calls for a continued engagement also of the police with the political parties. I think there is openness to do that and to address any issues which may be out there. But I must say that I observe from all the electoral management bodies, including the police, a real willingness to engage, to understand what some of the concerns and the issues are, and to then address them.
Maria, what's your assessment on the role of the police?
Yes, thank you. I don't have anything substantially different to say from what my colleagues have said. We have always encouraged the police to conduct themselves with impartiality, to de-escalate situations whenever they become involved in them, to ensure that they are acting with the utmost professionalism. As my UK colleague said, we have been working together to provide training and equipment to the police to ensure that they have the tools and the skills necessary to do so. And we have seen some examples recently where the police were able to come into situations and actually de-escalate them. And that's something that we encourage and we want to see more of. Is every single policeman and every single member of the security services perfect? No, of course not. That's not true in any country, not true in mine, and not true in Sierra Leone. But by and large, I think we can say that the police are doing what they need to do and doing their jobs professionally.
Alright, so we're still with us in the studio, guys. We will now look at messages and comments on our Facebook page. This first message from Shita Williams on our Facebook says, this question goes to the US Ambassador. If an individual has specific visa restriction to enter the US, will that restriction be lifted if that individual becomes a diplomat or travels with a diplomatic passport?
Alright, this other one, they say, Maria Viwa, what is your take on the results published by NEC?
Radio Democracy, please tell Mr. Ibrahim Sori that our education is on standstill. We can no longer wait for any postponement of elections.
This other one, they say, how can you say the elections were credible when recounting is everywhere?
Another message from OK Bomin on Facebook say runoff is inevitable anyway. What I am saying is that the policies of the APC fail to convince majority of Sierra Leoneans, and the people responded with a shocking rejection of endorsements of the APC candidates. The APC have applied plan A to Z and it's not working, so they are forming a way to extend their governance within any means that will not work. So let's face the battle line right at the polls and hear the say of the people. 7th March 2018 all the way. They are narrating this person to say.
Alright, this one on Charles Magai in declaration story. They say, thank you very much, Francis Charles Magai, for supporting the SLPP. They come from Abdulrahman Nawellington.
This one says, I hope these guys will help us, give us few talks to the police and the military just before the election.
This one say, we begin a school day upside down because of the election where Olma wants for win. Oh, Salone.
On Facebook, Lawrence Lima, they say the US Ambassador has reiterated the popular Creole maxim to Sierra Leoneans that we should discourage Congosa, Kegublinkam. Nice reminder of our maxim here, Her Excellency, the Ambassador of the United States of America, Maria Guerra.
This one said there is no way we could afford to do a forensic audit before the runoff.
Rose Kanu say, US Ambassador, could you say the naval exercise presently on the coast of Sierra Leone is a deterrent? Could you please comment on the role of the exercise?
This one on lawyer Ibrahim Sohin's story, where they say, Mr. Lawyer, can we hold on the peace till after the runoff? The idea of postponement is not relevant. Alright, so they continue for take few more message, then we dey come studio, and the studio guests then go respond to we text message them.
This what I want to say, the issue of forensic auditing into net system is untimely. All we need is free, fair and credible elections come March 27, 2018. This will run off from Answers Bangor and Asmara Sam.
Guy, we have questions that came in.
Oh, thank you. I mean, one of the things I heard in a lot of those comments was the desire of people to not only have a fair, free, transparent and peaceful election, but for the process to be concluded. And I think we all share that desire, that we get to the end of this process. And from what I've heard during today's discussion, I think really that revolves around four main things happening. I mean, I think the first thing is that the electoral management bodies, the police, the NEC, the PPRC and others, that their independence is respected, that they are empowered to do their job, that they learn the lessons from the first round, and that they act in a practical way upon that. I think the second thing that I take from the discourse is the need to get that discourse back to policy issues and away from tribalism, geography and divisive politics. And I think the third thing is that we would ask all political leaders, and I mean all political leaders, not just flag bearers. We can't have flag bearers saying one thing and people out in the provinces saying another. Commit to non-violence, to promoting peace with all their supporters, and being seen together, speaking together, engaging constructively with each other. I think that could send a very strong signal to the people of Sierra Leone. And finally, if we're going to have a result, people need to respect that result. There are dispute resolution mechanisms, but in the end, it's only the NEC results that count. And we saw in the first round a lot of stuff on social media predicting victory, predicting all sorts of things. But I mean, people should try and block out all that electronic noise and focus on the real results and the real dispute recommendations, and then the country can unite and go forward. And when that happens, the United Kingdom, and I'm sure other donors, will stand ready to renew our relationship with whoever leads this country and go forward.
Okay.
Thank you. No, absolutely. I think the comments really show a very strong support for the process. It sounds like a very healthy and respectful debate, and people are certainly in favour of the process continuing. I also picked up a very strong commitment to education. A number of the comments referenced that schools being closed, and I think addressing that really means achieving a clear result on Tuesday, allowing a government to be formed and for the next government to continue to address development issues in Sierra Leone, addressing poverty, improving education, economic growth, all those very important economic issues that are facing the country at the moment that will not be supported by a protracted electoral process.
It's over to you, Tom.
Thank you very much. Three issues that I would like to raise. I mean, the first one, I want to start off again that here, us as partners, we're completely neutral in this. Our interest is that we see a process in which the people of Sierra Leone have a genuine opportunity to express their choice and to choose the government that they want. We will work with whatever government is chosen by the people, and we want to see this process being concluded in a peaceful and credible way. Second point, this issue of credibility. Yes, what we have seen so far, I should say, was that the process has been managed indeed in a professional and credible way. We have observers as EU who have stayed here throughout. We still have them in all the districts at the moment. We will get reinforcements very soon to be able to monitor also election day. They act independently, but of course we will have to make a final judgment on how this process was conducted after everything is concluded. We're only in an intermediary phase at the moment. It is our very sincere hope that indeed at the end of the process we will be able to say that indeed these elections were credible and respected, allowed for the people's will to be respected in the outcome of the process. That is very key, and it's everybody's duty to continue to work through that. The last point that I would like to reiterate is this issue of maintaining the peace. temperatures have gone up in the last days, and while this is very concerning, it's also heartening to see that so many people have spoken out against it. I think there is a very strong desire on the vast majority of the people that peace is maintained, that there is no tribalism. Everybody realizes that this is not in the interest of the development of the country. There is a big responsibility on the part of the political leaders, but all stakeholders, to speak the same language, not to leave any ambiguity, all people not to spread any rumors, be inciting towards others, and for people to act if they see that some people are engaging in such a way. It should not be tolerated. I think the peace has to prevail. It's in everybody's interest, and we all have to work towards that and to make sure that indeed these elections can be concluded in a way that Sierra Leoneans have a genuine way to express what they want in the future for this country.
Thank you very much, Tom. Over to you, Maria.
Yes, first of all, thank you for saying you call me Creole. I did try small. Thank you to my Creole teacher, Tete. No mon ami, I know Takam well, but I did try, so thank you for that. To answer some of the other questions, there was a question about this naval exercise that's happening off the coast, and it is indeed happening. We put out a press release about it last week. It is called Obangame Express. It's an annual maritime exercise that involves the naval forces of a number of countries, including Sierra Leone. But it is something that just happens to coincide with the runoff. It was not planned that way, but it involves a number of West African countries, including the Spanish, the Greek, the U.S., other naval forces. So that is what that is, and it really has nothing to do with the elections. So it's just a coincidence. Regarding the questions of visas and visa waivers, I won't go into the full complicated background of visa waivers, but just to say that there is a possibility if someone has, for some reason, not been able to receive a visa in the past, if they are in a position with the government, they can request a waiver, and it can be reviewed at the highest levels in the State Department, in the U.S. government, and it can be granted. So just to say that it is possible, but complex. Regarding the NEC results, I think there was a question about that. I know that we, along with all of Sierra Leone, was waiting recently. What will happen? When will they release? Why are they delayed? We were all very excited about that. But I think that our NEC commissioner, Conte, his point was that he wanted it to be deliberate and correct rather than quick. And I have to say that, as impatient as I was, and I think with everyone else, to know what the results of the first round were, that it was the right decision to make sure that the answers, the final numbers were correct rather than quick. And so I respect that position, and I doubt that it will change in the future. So, and then finally, just to reiterate what all of my colleagues have said, and I think our number one unified message this morning has been the need for peace, for serenity, for calm, for a reduction in this tribal, ethnic, regional language, to remember that this is one Sierra Leone, and there is only one Sierra Leone, and it is your mama Salone, now you own Salone, and really you have to love it and care for it, and in so doing, love and care for your fellow man.
Thank you very much, Maria. Over to you, Guy. What specific support are you providing to the electoral process during the runoff?
So we've continued to support this process from over 2 years ago. We put a large amount of money into the UNDP Basket Fund, which is one of the major funders in turn of the NEC and the other EMBs. So we haven't had to put any additional resource in for the second round, because we had already established a contingency which allowed this to be paid for, and we have already been to the other EMBs and check that they have enough resources to run the second round, and that is the case. It's worth saying, however, that, and I said this last time I was here, that this is the first election that Sierra Leone has run itself, and the majority of I don't want to create the impression that we're paying for all of this, and we're making our contribution, but the majority of the funds for this election for the first time have come from the government, and the people of Sierra Leone should be proud of it.
Catherine, what's your own support given to the electoral process on the runoff?
So Irish Aid has been working on the electoral process for a couple of years as well, also offering financial support to UNDP for the operations of the National Electoral Commission. specifically for the runoff, also we've been working with the MBs on their contingency plans for a number of months, and for this period we have provided some additional support as part of the contingency planning for next staffing.
Tom?
I don't have a substantially different answer to the question. The good thing to note is actually that nobody was foreseeing as such a runoff, but we were all planning for it, and this is also on the part of the government. This was a possibility that it was going to happen. So in the way that the EMBs have prepared for this with government support and with our support, this was part of the plan. So I think everybody's ready to move into this next phase now, also with our support. And I can also say that in addition, what we're doing is the observation mission, so is bringing back a number of short-term observers to be here, to be able to follow this process properly. There will be about 80 persons observing for the...
When are we expecting them?
Well, in the next days. There's already, the majority of people are actually already here because we have long-term observers who have stayed here all along. We have a core team which has stayed here all along. So in the next days, short-term observers are coming back to observe this process and to also add credibility to the process.
At the end of the whole observation period, we will have reports, a comprehensive report from them.
Correct, yes. I mean, they will take their time to compile all the elements, listen to all the stakeholders, assess all the data which has been collected, and indeed present a very comprehensive report which gives an overview of how the process has been going, but also importantly to come with a set of recommendations which can feed into future electoral processes. And this will be also one of our tasks, to continue to follow up that indeed we do something with these recommendations.
Maria, on the issue of elections violence, is the diplomatic community doing any sort of observation or independent monitoring on this elections violence?
I believe we have been, and I think again we've been following these issues very closely, and we've been making public statements. We've also been privately speaking to the government, to the parties, to the leaders, to the public, to encourage them to respect the peace and to keep the peace. We also have been supporting through our USAID grants programs such as the Women's Situation Room, the Eminent Women's Group. I know that they have been working on doing a number of public speeches and public communications to, again, really reinforce this message and reaching out also to the political parties. So we have been following these issues very closely. We have been very concerned, and I think we've been very upfront with those concerns. And I think that those messages are being heard, and we just encourage that.
So what might be the worst case scenario here?
Well, I think this country's already experienced the worst case scenario, and I don't think that anyone wants to return to those dark days. And I think that's the bottom line here, is that Sierra Leone has the ability to rise above, and we have seen Sierra Leone heal herself. We've seen people come together after some of the most difficult times in this country's history. And we would like to see that same spirit of unity and love and togetherness, reunite this country again.
So, Guy, are you prepared to go into any mediation between political parties after the runoff election in case we have any issues among them?
Well, I think I've already answered that question once. There are mediation mechanisms that exist out there, and I think they should be used first and foremost. But I think when we have a result, it will be incumbent upon all members of the international community to try and convince any political party who is not accepting that result to accept it. And I'm sure the UK will play its role in that, but we're not putting ourselves forward as sole mediators. I think this is the international community, all the presidents who are ex-presidents who are leading the observer missions, the people internally. We all need to get together to ensure that the result is respected. But the UK does not put itself forward as a sole mediator of any disputes. Those mechanisms exist. They are part of the process. There is the courts. There are informal mechanisms which are always best used first, and let's hope we can get to a result.
All right, Kathleen, what advice can you give to Sierra Leoneans leading to the runoff?
I think the very enthusiastic turnout on the first round was really very encouraging, and I really hope that that will be repeated next Tuesday. I think in turbulent times it's more important than ever that people show their support for the electoral process, especially women. Come out, have your voice heard, participate in the process. I think it's excuse me, it's really very important, and over the next number of days, that those messages that we've been saying around calm, tolerance, respect for political opponents, having a constructive dialogue, engaging with National Electoral Commission, with the security forces, I think being really well prepared and confident in a peaceful and credible day. I think that's really important, and I'm sure that will happen.
Tom, quickly, there is this belief that the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is zooming in Sierra Leone, gathering evidence for political leaders who might, who might inspire young people to go into violence or instigate them to go into violence. Is that true?
I think we're still very far away from this, and there is still every opportunity here for all the leaders to address any issues which are out there. As we have said, the tensions which are there are very regrettable, and we don't condone any of this kind of hate speech which is out there. And everybody has a responsibility to address it, but I think it's not too late. And what I would like to add is that we have seen here that the leaders of this country from opposing factions have this incredible capacity to come together also. And perhaps this is an opportunity to invite also Dr. Samuel Kamara and Brigadier Madabio to come together again and to show that really they're together in this, that they, and I'm intimately convinced that they both want that peace prevails in this country, and I think they can speak together to make sure that the Sierra Leonean people are convinced that is indeed the case.
Okay, to come and talk, Maria, talk to Salone people there.
Well, Naindat, thank you for listening to us this morning. I think that we've all been very unified in our messaging this morning, which is that, you only have one Mama Salone. You need to love her, you need to take care of her, you need to take care of each other, and peace needs to reign in this country. So,
all right.
Thank you.
Well, we're for telling our plenty thank you. That voice is going to be Maria Burua. We're the U.S. Ambassador on Salone, and we will get Storm Vance, EU Ambassador, Kathleen Campbell, Irish Ambassador, and also Guy Warrington. We are the British High Commissioner on Salone. I want to thank you for joining the program.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's all.